Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into one of the most epic, fascinating, and honestly decades-long biological journeys in the human body. Today, we're tracking the incredible transformation of a single primordial germ cell all the way into a fully mature ovum. It's a story about survival, really complex cellular architecture, and absolutely precise chemical timing.
Okay, think about this for a second. Did you know that a female's body actually begins producing eggs months before she's even born? It's a completely mind-blowing concept when you really stop and think about it. We're going to use this incredible biological reality as our starting point today to explore the vast, complex timeline of female gametogenesis.
So here's our roadmap. We'll start with the journey before birth, move through the three cellular phases, build the ovarian follicle, decode the genetic mechanics, unpack puberty's hormonal triggers, and then finally reach ovulation.
Part 1. A journey before birth. Let's go back in time to embryonic life.
There is a really sharp contrast between male and female reproduction that we need to establish right away. Spermatogenesis, that's a continuous, ongoing process. It's driven by a steady loop of testosterone that starts at puberty. But oogenesis is a strictly limited, finite process that begins incredibly early, literally during fetal life. A female is born with all the primary gametes she will ever have. The factory basically opens, produces its lifetime supply, and then permanently shuts down its production line before the baby even takes her first breath.
And wow, that production line is busy while it's open. Right around the 5th month of fetal pregnancy, the female fetus reaches a staggering peak of 7 million primary follicles. 7 million! And the absolute crucial takeaway here is that after this specific window in fetal development, no new primary follicles are ever formed again. Ever. From that peak of 7 million, the numbers just drastically drop off. It's like a massive elimination tournament. By birth, only about 3 to 4 million survive. Then, during the long pause of childhood, millions more degenerate just because they don't get the necessary nutrition to survive, which is a process called atresia. By the time a female reaches puberty, only about 60,000 to 80,000 primary follicles remain awake and available in each ovary. It's an intense journey where only a tiny, super resilient fraction of follicles actually survive to see reproductive maturity.
Moving into Part 2. The 3 phases of oogenesis.
This decades-long journey is neatly organized into a really simple study guide of 3 distinct cellular phases. First up is the multiplication phase. This happens entirely during fetal life, where cells are just rapidly cloning themselves via mitosis. Then comes the growth phase. Now, this is by far the longest phase. It lasts from birth all the way to puberty. It acts as a massive nutritional charging period, where the primary oocyte grows and just stockpiles energy. Finally, the maturation phase kicks in from puberty onward, where the cell switches over to meiosis, meaning it divides its genetic material in half to prepare for actual reproduction. Part 3. Building the ovarian follicle. How does the cell protect itself?
Think of this whole process like a cell putting on successively thicker, more complex winter coats. First, the primary oocyte wraps itself in a single protective coat of stromal cells called granulosa cells. That's our primary follicle. Next, as it becomes a secondary follicle, it adds outer layers called the theca. Then, it develops into a tertiary follicle by hollowing out a fluid-filled moat around itself, which we call the antrum. And finally, it reaches its ultimate form, the fully swollen, mature Graafian follicle, totally ready for ovulation.
And this part brilliantly illustrates the autonomy of the cell. As the follicle matures into a secondary oocyte within that Graafian follicle, the oocyte actively secretes its very own specialized, non-cellular protein shield called the zona pellucida. It's literally out there building its own custom defense system to protect itself while it prepares for potential fertilization. How cool is that?
Part 4. Meiosis and chromosome counts. Let's look at the DNA.
Now, we have to talk about the highly strategic, unequal division happening here. When the primary oocyte, which is diploid, so it has a full set of chromosomes, completes its first meiotic division, it doesn't split the cytoplasm evenly. Not at all. Instead, the resulting secondary oocyte essentially hoards almost all the cytoplasm and nutrients, becoming haploid. Meanwhile, the other half of the genetic material gets shoved into a tiny, unviable little cell called the first polar body, which is just discarded. The body is deliberately pooling all of its resources into one single highly nutritious survivor cell.
But remember, this genetic division doesn't just happen all at once. Oogenesis acts exactly like a video game, where you're pausing the action.
The first pause button is hit during childhood, leaving the primary oocyte completely frozen in prophase I of meiosis. It just waits there for years, maybe decades, for puberty to finally hit play. Then it pauses a second time. The secondary oocyte halts in metaphase II right before ovulation, and it waits for a very specific external play button to resume.
Part 5. Hormones that trigger puberty.
So who exactly is pushing those play buttons? Well, it all starts in the brain. GnRH, or gonadotropin-releasing hormone, is that initial domino. It's the chemical messenger that restarts the pause journey after more than a decade of childhood dormancy. Secreted by the hypothalamus at puberty, GnRH awakens the anterior pituitary gland, basically sending an alert that it's finally time to get the reproductive system online. Once awake, the pituitary gland responds by releasing two crucial hormones that work together in perfect harmony. First is FSH, or follicle-stimulating hormone, which, just like it sounds, physically stimulates the growth of those ovarian follicles. The second is LH, or luteinizing hormone. LH activates the theca cells on the outside of the follicle to start producing androgens, which the granulosa cells cleverly convert into estrogen, and that creates a really powerful chemical feedback loop. As that follicle grows, it pumps out more and more estrogen. Eventually, this high level of estrogen switches from providing a negative feedback loop to a positive one. It directly tells the brain to release a massive, rapid spike of luteinizing hormone. We call this the LH surge, and it's the dramatic climax of the hormonal loop. Now, if there's a hormonal imbalance, like with polycystic ovary syndrome or PCOS, this surge doesn't happen. Ovulation pauses and fertility is impacted. But when everything works perfectly, this surge directly causes that swollen, mature Graafian follicle to finally rupture.
Which brings us to Part 6, ovulation and final maturation.
That rupture we just mentioned? That's ovulation. The secondary oocyte is ejected right out of the ovary. But what about the Graafian follicle it leaves behind? Those leftover winter coats, the granulosa and theca layers, they rapidly transform into a temporary endocrine gland called the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum immediately goes to work, pumping out massive amounts of progesterone to thicken and prep the endometrial lining of the uterus. It's getting the room ready, just in case a fertilized embryo is on the way to implant.
And here we are at the ultimate fork in the road for our cellular hero. The secondary oocyte is currently paused in metaphase II. If no sperm arrives, the corpus luteum eventually degenerates, progesterone levels crash, the unfertilized oocyte is lost, and the menstrual cycle simply restarts. But if a sperm does arrive and attaches to that zona pellucida, it hits that final play button.
Which leads us to this final, honestly incredible realization. The biological reality is that a true, fully mature ovum, one that has completed meiosis II and released its second polar body, only actually exists for a brief, fleeting moment if fertilization occurs. The arrival of the sperm is the absolute necessary spark that completes this decades-long journey. Without it, the final step is never taken. It's such a provocative secret of human biology, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope mapping out this chronological journey has really illuminated the epic story of oogenesis for you.